Hi everyone and welcome back to the episode number nine of Azure. For sure, I'm your host Simon. We're back once again. I know there has been we're running maybe 4 minutes late, but I'll tell you what, it's raining heavily at my place. There's so much action packed. Last 5-10 minutes have been already. In fact, not last 5-10 minutes. Last 1 or 2 days scheduling this show, but finally we are here, and I'm really excited for someone. I am hosting for the very first time, and if some any any one of you who is joining us for the very first time, we do this live shows every Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. That is what the time is actually now. And but this is episode number 9, and as you know, we only have about 10 episodes each season. This is season number 2, so this is the second last episode. I cannot believe it's already been 2 months. And but the interesting part is I wanted to do the final episode as an in-person interview, but I have not been able to find someone at my place to do the interview. So yeah, let's stay hopeful. Having said that, today we're going to talk about Azure Cognitive Services, about which I have literally zero idea. That is why we have an expert today, Sam. I hope I say that name right. I'm going to miss his last name because I'm going to mess it up. I'm only going to say Sam. He is a software engineer focused on the Microsoft stack of technologies, that is .NET, SQL Server, and Azure. As a part of NIS Technology, he provides consulting services, training, and custom app development to help bring more value to business application. All right, there is our rock star of the day. So without any further ado, let's bring Sam in the show. Hi, Sam. Welcome to the Azure for Show live show.
Thank you, Simon. Great to be here.
I'm so happy, Sam. Finally, could make it to this live show. And quickly, why don't you go ahead and tell folks where you're joining us from, and maybe a quick intro about you.
Sure. So I'm coming in live from beautiful and sunny Cleveland, Ohio.
Wow.
And I've been a software engineer for roughly 28 years now, going on
Wow.
29. And I've been focusing mostly on the Microsoft stack. Kind of fell in love with it since the early 2000s and love the documentation around it, the community. So I started getting involved heavily into that, started doing teaching courses, doing consulting work. And the more I learn about the stack, the more I want to learn more. So it's been very fruitful, and looking forward to gaining a lot more insight into a lot of the newer technologies that are evolving.
Yeah, that's I see with your topic itself, Azure Cognitive Services, right? This is itself a technology that has evolved over time, especially with all this new chat GPT and the Copilot thing coming in. But before we get into that, Sam, I see you have some MVP awards in the background. What's up with that? When did, and 28 years, I don't want to age you, Sam, but I was not born 28 years back. I was not even born.
It's
Probably
all
my
good.
parents.
No problem. But yeah, I'm very proud to display the MVP award behind me.
Hmm.
I just recently earned my sixth MVP award in artificial intelligence.
Wow.
So again, it's one of those things that's just a driving motivator for me. With every reward, I just strive to do more and more, and learn more, and more importantly, teach more.
Hmm.
So I'm very excited to be here. Very excited to talk about Azure Cognitive Services and show you all the benefits that it has to offer.
That's great. So having said that, Sam, for someone who's hearing this term for the very first time, right, Azure Cognitive Services, right, how would you go ahead and tell them what it is and what's around this services in the Azure?
Sure. So, in a nutshell, it's a
Hmm.
set of services provided by Azure that allow an application to speak, to see, and to understand in a very similar way that a human being would. And so, like one of my favorite features is with the natural language processing. And one of my hobbies is cars. I love anything around cars. So I
Yeah.
always use the example of walking into a car dealership. So you walk into a car dealership, you can say, I'm looking to buy a car. I'm interested in purchasing a vehicle. What do you have for sale? All these are three different sentence structures, but essentially you have only one intention behind it, right? And that is to purchase the vehicle. And so with natural language processing, it'll understand in the same manner that a human being would, after some training, of course. And then it will be able to decipher that this user is actually after buying a car. And so then you, as a developer, what you would do is you would take that sentence structure that the user types in, you would submit it into the Cognitive Services API. It will then return back a token. Again, all dependent on how you train it. It will return that token to say buy car, and then you can process in your application, what should I do after I understand the user's intention is to buy a car? So imagine it's a kiosk and the user will type in whatever it is that they're looking to do, whether it's buy the car or get a car serviced, or maybe speak to a manager. So it will decipher what the user wants, return a token to the application. And going on the specific example of buying a car, once I understand the user is there to buy a car, now I can query my inventory from the database and say, we have X number of vehicles in stock. Which one would you like to test drive? So I am now having an interaction with a machine in the same way that I would with a human.
Yeah, that sounds very futuristic, and I can't believe it's already there, and people are using it. You used a couple of terminologies, like you said, training, right? Then you just have to call an API and you get a token, you get a response, right? So just walk us through. I mean, if I hear the term training, right, do I need to train on my own, or Azure helps us in the way? And how does the API calling works? Do I need to be in any particular stack? Just walk us through that part.
Okay, so with a training, for example, I would think of it as if you're training a 3-year-old youngster,
Not
right?
easy, but yeah, let's do that.
Sounds simple, right? So you would
Yeah.
show them something like this, and you would say, "This is a cup," right?
Hmm.
And this is a mouse.
Yeah.
You're giving them visual elements with it they can identify. It's the same
Hmm.
thing with natural language processing. I can give it a phrase and say, I want to buy a car. And the intention of that is buy car. And it's a token that I would identify with that phrase. And then I would give it some additional phrases that go along with that, such as, I want to purchase a vehicle. Will you sell me a car? So I give it all these phrases and I identify that the intention is to buy car. That's a token that I identified.
Hmm.
And then once I submit those phrases, then I have a portal where I can click the train button, and the
Hmm.
train button will essentially take those phrases and anything similar to it and attach it to that token. So
Okay.
then later, if another customer comes in and has a different request that's phrased differently, such as, I am very anxious to purchase a vehicle today, then it will know that that user's intention is to buy a car, and so
Hmm.
we'll return that to the application.
Okay. That sounds pretty easy, right? Imagine I know. I mean, if I had to go ahead and write my own Python code scripts, right, using maybe, let's say, TensorFlow, right? Then first I'll have to learn TensorFlow, understand it, then maybe write it, then also have a compute engine if I'm doing it locally, right? That would be a big challenge. But you say that using Azure Cognitive Service, I don't have to worry all that. It all happens on Azure. We use their compute, and we pick up the intent from whatever is the sentence, and we then use it with our whatever way we want to do it, right? So let me ask you this, Sam, right? When you go ahead and train it, right, do you want to create a compute resource in the Azure, or you can do it from within the Azure Cognitive Services? How does that computing part works? Because I know that that is something that goes a lot, right? It takes a lot of your power, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of cognitive services. So these are
Mhm.
already prepackaged, and it helps to make it available to the non-machine learning expert. If you can
Yeah,
make an
like me.
API call, now
Hmm.
you become a cognitive services expert. So
Wow.
essentially, with some of the cognitive services, it entails training a model to go along with it, which is something that you would have to do. So the first step is I would need to set up an Azure subscription,
Hmm.
and then I would take those subscription keys and then go into a portal, and they have portals for custom vision, for natural language processing. So I would take those keys, go into my natural language processing portal, and then link it with my Azure subscription, and then begin to train it. I would submit sample phrases, and then the token that goes along with it of what the user's intention is, and I give it multiple phrases so that it can train on and see what other phrases could be similar to it, and then it attaches those to that token. And then I simply publish the API all within Azure,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm able to access that API call from my application. So I didn't have to reserve a virtual machine. I didn't have to set aside computing space. It's all essentially within an API call and the portal that goes along with it.
Wow, that sounds pretty easy, right? All I need to do is give the data and maybe mark some intent initially, and it will train on its own, and then I get the endpoints. So Sam, when you say that you can go ahead and upload some images or maybe the text or write the speech, how much of the data is needed? For the image, I can think like, okay, upload 20, 30. I can also upload 100 images, so I want, right? But when it comes to text, how do you that do we actually have to go ahead and write it down? Okay, these are the 10 ways a salesman could be approached asking about the car's color or maybe about the engine. Is that how it works?
Certainly, you'd want to give it as many phrases as you think would be
Hmm.
applicable, but obviously, you're still going to be approached by other phrases that you didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
And so you train it as best as you can. And given the set of data that you give it, it will automatically look and see what else is similar to it in meaning with different words. And again, attach those to that same token. But let's say that it is uh, you get another phrase from a customer that basically doesn't coincide with the training model. Well,
Yeah.
it'll return back the result set with a confidence rating, and it will
Oh.
say, I'm not sure what this user wants. And again, you can accommodate that for your application where you can say, you can tell the user, please rephrase your question, or let me get someone to help you. Um, but then, in addition to that, you can take that phrase that the user entered in that the application wasn't sure what the intention was, and then train it on that phrase later on.
Oh, that's interesting. So what you're doing is you're taking the phrase. You've not just trained it once, so it is happening on the fly too, right? If I give a phrase, that phrase again goes back, and then the model is getting trained once again, so that over time it keeps on getting better, right?
Correct. So the model training is something that the developer would have to do. But
Okay.
just like everything else in all the applications that we develop, we have a V1, a V2, a
Hmm.
V2.1, right? So it's constantly evolving. It's the same thing with machine learning and cognitive services. I get something that I didn't anticipate. I can now train it on that. And now I have a better model to work with.
Yeah, that is great. And I see the NLP examples that you're giving, right? We all have this chat GPT going on, whatnot. I bet that is very interesting, right? We all use it every single day, and I use it every single day now. So, Sam, now that you've worked with it, right? And this sounds like a piece of cake, right? Like, all right, I just need to give the data and I get my endpoints. But still, there must be some challenging point, right? What are some of the challenges that one may face while getting started with Azure Cognitive Service for someone like me who has never used it, right? Even an API returning me something, I may not be able to know what to do with it. So, what are some of the maybe couple of challenges you faced while getting started with this cognitive services?
It was actually a very simple and easy process to get started with. But some of the
Mm-hmm.
things that may throw you off is, like I said, phrases that you didn't anticipate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, you can retrain it on that later. But then expanding into custom vision, for example, now if I show it a product like a coffee mug, now it's
Mm-hmm.
dependent on all the images around it, as well as the lighting, the angle. So if I show it like this, will it still recognize it as a coffee mug, right?
Yeah.
So I need to train it on different angles and different lighting situations. Um, so that's where the training comes in. It sounds simple, but you have to throw many examples at it in order to increase that confidence score and be able to have an application that's production worthy.
Yeah, so it means that I really don't have to hire a data scientist or a machine learning engineer to go ahead and do it, right? If I'm already, it makes sense. I mean, if it makes sense if I'm already on an Azure, I can go ahead and leverage this resource instead of me actually moving to Azure for this. I mean, that is also not a bad idea. But if you're already running your solutions in Azure, then it makes sense to go ahead and explore it. So Sam, let me ask you this. I know it makes sense, right? Since if you are getting 8 points, so it is tech stack independent, but it means that anyone can actually go ahead and get started, right? You don't have to come from a .NET background because it's Azure or anything like that, right?
That's exactly right. So whatever application or framework you're using, if you can make an API call within that application, you can
Hmm.
access cognitive services.
Yeah, that was a short answer, but it made sense.
Right, right. And the beautiful part about it is, unlike setting up machine learning workspace in Azure, which
Yeah.
it's going to require a VM and some disk space, and not to mention the cost of just having that in place, even if you're not using it. Cognitive
Hmm.
services, on the other hand, you can train the model, leave it in the portal, and it won't have a an occurring cost repeatedly.
Hmm.
It's basically on the number of calls that you make, and even then, they offer a free tier so developers can experiment with it, and it gives you a lot of leeway to test out your application before you start incurring cost from the API calls later. But just simply having it in place doesn't incur any cost.
Yeah, that's good. Especially newbies getting in, starting the viewing and just forgetting it to shut it down before they leave. So I think this part really helps to all the freshers joining in. Having said that, Sam, since it is so easy, right? But someone would go ahead and make n number of API calls, right? Let's say I'm getting started, I may end up putting in a for loop. I may end up doing n number of calls. Is there any limits to how many API calls I make, or is there any stats we get on the fly from the Azure Cognitive Service of all that we use?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a portal,
Hmm.
like I mentioned, and within that portal, you have a dashboard that shows you the number of calls that were made. You can
Hmm.
also access and see the success and the confidence score of these calls. If things weren't successful, then you can take those calls that failed and then retrain your model. Within that same portal, you can redeploy your model, set it for staging, and then eventually push it out to a production slot. You can also do batch training. So I don't have to enter in one phrase at a time. I can upload an Excel spreadsheet of 1,000 phrases and the intentions and just immediately upload that and do batch training on it.
Oh, wow,
Um,
that's good to know.
yeah, so it comes in very handy that way.
Yeah, that's good to know. You don't have to type it down everything, right? You have an Excel, right? Maybe you got that Excel from people doing search on your website, right? You
Right.
just can we also do JSON? I mean, if you have CSV, then JSON should be possible, right? Is JSON
So
possible?
yes, yeah, there will be. There are some things that are done in the JSON format.
Mm-hmm.
So you can download the model after you've trained it, and it will be
Okay.
in a JSON format. So it'll show you what the phrases are and the intentions that are set for those phrases.
Okay.
But one thing I wanted to kind of point out, although this is a very cool feature and very easy to use, I think we underestimate it and we don't utilize it enough, in the sense that
Mhm.
you can set a kiosk at any retail establishment where if someone comes in, and this is specific for um, like niche markets. So, for
Mhm.
example, let's say that I go into uh,
You gotta bring something other than that coffee cup.
I have it handy.
Oh, there you go.
Right? So someone who doesn't know that this is a USB thumb drive can walk in and say, just hold it up to a camera and say, I need one of these, right?
Mhm.
So with custom vision, it can then identify this image, and then it would reply back, well, I have a 32 gig in stock, I have a 64 gig in stock. Which one would you like? Um, Take that even a step further with, let's say, the HVAC industry, for example, where they have um, uh, a reduction motor or
Mhm.
a vacuum pressure check, a check valve, I should say. You know, the people that work in that industry know what it is, but if you're a DIYer and you pulled out that part and you don't know what it's called,
Yeah.
again, you can go up to the retailer with a kiosk and then just simply show them that part and it will recognize it. Same thing with online retailers as well. Just simply point my camera to an object, take a picture of it, and then it can tell me, oh, well, this is a vacuum motor, part number XYZ, and we have 3 units in stock.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I now Now that was you coming from an expert. The only thing I could relate from what you said is the filters, right? We have Snapchat and Instagram filters, right? I mean, I think they have trained on the face, right? I know they would put some filters on us, right? Right, some funny filters. Yeah, so I think that is also one that I use it every single day. There's no nearby place where this is happening, right? Where I have to show up and this thing happens. Nothing, I cannot recall anything happening at my place. I see those mirrors where people just walk to a mirror and you can actually change your dress. I've seen some videos around it. But yeah, to me, I couldn't recognize that it was a thumb drive. I thought it's a candy anyway, so that's a good thing, you know. So, but Sam, at the end of the day, it's we giving the data, right? It's a, we are giving the data, so we end up giving wrong data. Let's say I didn't know you call it a thumb drive. May call it a pen drive, or I may not even recognize it. So
Mhm.
don't you think at the end of the day the model cannot be accurate 100%, because if he is the humans giving them the data, especially when you say that there's a feedback loop that's happening in that model.
So let's say that I was training it on this, with vision service.
Hmm.
Obviously, it can only recognize this image, but what about other thumb drives that are similar to it?
Yeah.
There are others that come that appear to be in the shape of a key,
Hmm.
some that come with a huge chain attached to it. So
Yeah.
you'd have to train it on all these different images in order for it to recognize. And again, it's not just the specific item itself, but then you also have to consider the orientation of how it's presented. So what if I hold it like this and I'm covering up the bottom portion? Is it
Looks
going to
different.
recognize
You
it?
bet.
I'm sorry?
It looks different. I'm with you.
Right. It looks different.
Yeah.
So it's all in how the user presents it. So I can't always rely on the user holding it up to the camera, because I could say, oh, I'm holding it up now, but in actuality, it's out of the line of vision of the camera, right?
That's a good
And then
example.
I
Yeah.
can't say, well, here it is, and I have a dark background. Uh,
Yeah.
so in some cases, it would be better to just have the camera pointed straight down at a desk or a table, and with a box that says "place item here." So that way,
Hmm.
you omit all these other things out of the image.
Huh? That's good. That's good. Those are some live examples you see from Sam. So, Sam, quick question. I know we're already at 24 minutes. I cannot believe it. I'm going to ask you one question. One more question that I can get is
Please.
now all this sounds so. I've been asking so many questions, right? So all these fascinating things, right? This vision, this natural language processing, and all things. How can someone who doesn't know about it can get started? Should I go ahead and watch some YouTube videos? Should I read some blog, or is there some comprehensive resource that you use to learn and stay updated?
Simple. Contact me. I'd be more than
Oh
happy to
yeah.
help.
Oh,
Right.
with
So
you.
that can be step one. The other thing is, if you Google it, it'll come up with Azure Cognitive Services. They have great write-ups, great tutorials that are linked through their website. And one of the things that I absolutely love with a capital L for that matter, is
Mm-hmm.
the Microsoft community rallies around each other and they support each other with documentation, tutorials, and just plain old assistance and mentorship. And so you can find a lot of tutorials online. I've blogged about it. I've also given a lot of user group presentations about it. So I'd be more than happy to help. And I see my LinkedIn link just popped up. So
Yeah.
uh, to all who are watching, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to help.
Yeah. And that's your blog, right?
No, that's actually the company I work for.
Oh, sorry. Never mind.
But it's all good.
You
My,
see, that's the beauty of this live show, right? Nothing is planned. I thought that's
it's the beauty of live presentations. I know.
yeah, I know AI was involved, right? So you see, you guys can make mistakes too. Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
that's our that's our guest blog. Yeah,
Yeah,
that you
now
can go
that
ahead
is
and
my
read.
blog. Yes, and I actually wrote a couple tutorials that are step by step for speech to text and text to speech, which is another set of services within cognitive services.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Sam, anything else you want to add before we just wrap up the show? I mean, it was lovely hosting you. Right, we covered a lot in just about 20-25 minutes. Anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
So the one thing I wanted to mention is what got me started into this whole AI journey was
Hmm.
a presentation, a brief presentation that I saw by a software engineer at Build 2016. His name was Saqib Sheikh, and he's a
I know
Microsoft
him.
engineer.
Yeah.
Great story, right?
Yeah.
And what he did was he was working on cognitive services, and he was demonstrating these features where he sat down at a restaurant and he's visually impaired, and he
Hmm.
basically held up his phone, and his phone was able to identify what was around him, people sitting
Yeah.
across from him. Naturally, he couldn't read the menu, so he held it over the menu and it read it for him, the different sections, the appetizers, the entrees, etc. So my point is, it's not just a cool feature. It's not just to be used in retail, but it can also be used to better humanity.
Yeah.
One of the projects that I started working on was actually working with a young lady who has a speech impediment, and she's working on refining her speech and her accent. And so we built an application to help her with that. So a lot, it's a very cool set of features, very easy to use. You can use it in a retail or industrial aspect, but more importantly, you can use it to better humanity, which I absolutely love about it.
Wow, Sam, that was very nicely put up. I think you wrapped it very nicely. Thank you so much, Sam, and it was lovely hosting you. And thank you so much for your time. I know it's your work time. Still, you got time for us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you,
I
Simon.
know someday I'm invite you once again to talk about your love for cars, but not today. Right. Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you everyone who's joined us today. We'll see you next time for the final episode. And Sam, thank you, and see you soon. Ta-ra.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
Simon.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.